Alright guys, so the 7th episode of The Bad Batch did officially drop on Disney+. It's called Battle Scars, and with that we will be continuing our weekly series where I break down the episode and just give my thoughts on it. So as usual, I will be spoiling the entirety of this episode, so if you guys haven't seen episode 7, make sure to go watch that first, then come back here. So there's your spoiler warning guys, let's go ahead and get right into it. Now last week I was actually unable to cover episode 6, so I did want to cover that briefly. Overall, I thought it was just an okay episode. It was kind of forgettable, and that episode kind of continued this frustration of mine where it felt like this show wasn't moving anywhere. I thought it was cool that we got to see Rafa and Trace from the Clone Wars. It's nice to see characters that we already know make a return in this show, and I also did like how they went to Corellia from Solo, a Star Wars story. Going to locations that we already know is always a good idea because it helps to connect this universe so much more. So overall, I thought it was just an okay episode. I thought it was pretty forgettable, but at the end of the day, it did take baby steps in the right direction. I do like that at the end of the episode, they were teasing a much larger storyline, but in general, I wasn't impressed by it or anything. There wasn't anything special with that episode. So that's pretty much what I think about episode 6, but episode 7 to me is much better. Things are actually starting to pick up and there are actual things happening, so this episode is much better. Like so far, my favorite episodes have been the very first one and now episode 7, which honestly isn't that high of a bar to pass, because episodes 2 to 6, in my opinion, were really forgettable. Anyways, the big thing in this episode is that we get the introduction of Captain Rex. Like I just stated earlier, bring back characters that we already know and love into this series is a good idea, and what better character to bring back than the fan favorite Captain Rex. We already knew that he was going to show up in this series at some point due to the trailers, but seeing him in the show now, it felt special and it gave me a reason to care. Anyways, I like the overall story of this episode. It's about the inhibitor chips and how they affect the Bad Batch. Captain Rex is obviously very well versed in this, and seeing all the callbacks to season 7 of the Clone Wars was really nice. Now, there's actually something pretty special in this episode. So Captain Rex and the Bad Batch head to a planet called Braca. And if you guys don't know, this planet is where the story of Cal Kestis, the main character of the video game Jedi Fallen Order, takes place. It's a pretty small Easter egg. We don't really see any big ties to Fallen Order at all, but in general, I still think it was cool to mention it because it helps to tie together these different Star Wars medias, that being a video game and a TV series. I like what Star Wars is doing overall with all their shows and video games and all this stuff and connecting them together. It kind of reminds me of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but in general it's a good thing and it makes this universe so much better. So the big climax of this whole inhibitor chip arc was the fact that we were going to see Wrecker kind of lose his mind and fight the rest of the Bad Batch. This is something that they've teased for quite a while now. We knew it was going to happen, and I think it played out pretty well. The whole scene was very aggressive and tense, and I like how it showed just how powerful Wrecker is. Like, he could pretty much take on the entire Bad Batch if he wanted to. Granted, they weren't trying to kill him or anything, and he was trying to kill them, but still, he was holding his own. And the climax of their battle there, where he was holding a gun to Omega saying good soldiers follow orders, that moment was amazing. Captain Rex, it does obviously save the day there, but seeing Wrecker and Omega's relationship have this tension and almost create a rift between them, I think that was a pretty cool thing for both of those characters. Omega is obviously the most attached to Wrecker just because Wrecker is the most childlike there, and seeing what is pretty much her best friend turn against her and then seeing how she handles that was great for her character development. So this episode was pretty interesting overall. It was much better than the last few episodes that we've seen, but I still don't think this is a great episode by any means. It doesn't really push the main storyline forward that much. Like, now that we've seen this whole inhibitor chip and Wrecker's headaches come to a close, I really want to see what's next for the story. Like, what is the bigger picture here? Who are the villains? What are the Bad Batch actually trying to do? And that's something that we still don't really know, but I'm glad this episode at least moved the story forward in some way. Now, one thing I did want to mention about Captain Rex here was that we pretty much got to see all these scenes that we see him in the trailer in this episode. So I'm not really sure if he's going to be making a comeback in this series. I really hope this isn't the last that we've seen of Captain Rex in the Bad Batch, just because I think this show benefits so much from seeing these old beloved characters make a return. But it just feels like this show is almost following a pattern where every episode we kind of like a guest star who shows up and then leaves after that, and we pretty much never see them again. We just get to see a cool interaction between a certain character and the Bad Batch. Like, we got to see Saw Gerrera, Fennec Shand, the Martez sisters, and now we've seen Captain Rex. And just the way they had him walking into the smoke there, it just really felt like we weren't going to see him again. But I'm really hoping that is not the case. He was talking about the rebellion a little bit there, so I'm hoping we see him later in the season at some point. One thing that I thought was actually pretty hilarious was the final conversation here between Hunter and Captain Rex. Captain Rex pretty much gives Hunter a pitch asking the Bad Batch to join the very early formations of the rebel cause. And Hunter replies that his priorities have changed and he has to do what's best for Omega. And then Captain Rex asks Hunter what is that exactly, and Hunter replies that he's still figuring it out. And what this conversation felt like to me was we the audience were Captain Rex, and then the Bad Batch TV series was Hunter, and we were pretty much asking the TV show, what are you actually trying to do with this show? And it felt like the show was telling us that they're still figuring it out. I don't know, right when I heard that little conversation, it felt funny to me because it felt so relevant to what we the audience were feeling. Anyways, the episode does end with a little tease as to what's going to happen next. I'm hoping that in the next episode we spend a little bit more time on Braca here and get even more Easter eggs toward Jedi Fallen Order. But in general, I do want to see Crosshair or a villain of some kind show up in next week's episode. But I think that pretty much wraps it up for my thoughts on episode 7 of The Bad Batch. Overall, it wasn't a bad episode at all, and this show is definitely taking steps in the right direction. Next week, we will be halfway through the first season of The Bad Batch, and I'm hoping that means that the plot is going to pick up dramatically. Normal cartoon series like this that air on TV kind of follow the same pattern where the first few months from like September to the holidays doesn't really move the plot forward that much, and then after the holidays everything ramps up and we get to see so much more. So I'm hoping this show is kind of following a similar pattern here, and in the second half of this season we're going to see so much more of Crosshair, Grand Moff Tarkin, and everything going on with Kamino. But that is just what I'm hoping for. We'll have to wait and see if it pans out. As always guys, before you head out, make sure to go down in the comments below and let me know what you guys thought about this episode. How do you guys feel about the show as a whole, and what do you think is going to happen in the future? Whatever you're thinking guys, anything and everything, make sure to leave it down in the comments below. But that'll pretty much do it for me. Again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.